So this sucks, because I actually recorded this video, and it was long as I don't know what. This was going to be a long-ass video response, just to the first part. And I somehow managed to delete all of my footage, so now I have to go back and re-record the first part of this 5-part series. I don't even know how many parts of this video series is going to be, but it's going to be a video response to Cosmic Skeptic's arguments for veganism, and I think his first YouTube video about it. I think it's his first, I could be wrong here, but he does have like another conference where he talks about his arguments for veganism that I never finished, but I will at some point in time. Now the reason why I'm going through this video is for a couple of reasons. Reason number one, I actually found this video from another guy. I think he's called a Genetically Modified Skeptic. He was doing a Q&A video with his wife, and then he said something like this.
What is your position on veganism? As you say in the rest of your post, yeah, Alex, a Cosmic Skeptic, has made a pretty great case for veganism, I think, across his channel and in various talks. So I guess really the story on that is Taylor and I both have always eaten meat, and very recently we were in Israel because I was speaking at a conference. Alex was also speaking at that conference, and Alex made such a good case for veganism while speaking that basically we decided that we would like to work toward that. And so ever since literally that day, since the moment we were sitting there and kind of looked at each other like, yeah, he's right, we've been vegetarian.
So I thought to myself, this guy who is clearly rational and skeptic was able to get convinced by these arguments, perhaps he might be able to get me. And needless to say, considering the fact that I'm doing this video response, clearly Cosmic Skeptic wasn't able to convince me. And in fact, I think his arguments are so bad that it warrants its own mini-series to go through. So, this is going to be me replying to Cosmic Skeptic. Now, I don't want this video to be super long because this first part's only going to be covering the first part of his video. So what I'm going to try to do is, depending on just like editing, if the edit is really long or longer than I want it to be, I'm going to cut out like the first section of my response to his introduction and then just only show you guys my counter argument to his first part of his entire argument. So with that being said, he'll take us away.
So speaking of Peter Singer, perhaps the most important animal ethicist of recent memory, I think the main philosophical takeaway from his book, which you should all definitely read by the way, I'll leave a link in the description, is this: that the boundary we've constructed between human beings and other animals is completely arbitrary and almost entirely unjustified. Here's a good quote. In the popular mind, the term animal lumps together beings as different as oysters and chimpanzees, while placing a gulf between chimpanzees and humans, although our relationship to those apes is much closer than the oysters.
This is where I play my first card. That's actually really silly. The word arbitrary means that you're creating a differentiation on something based on random choice or random chance. However, the difference between referring to humans as a separate category of animals, despite the fact that we may be called animals, is because we are radically different from, most animals in the animal kingdom. Even if you want to compare us to chimpanzees, which is our closest genetic, like not even ancestor, but closest genetic animal to us, saying that there's a 1 to 2% difference in our DNA, that 1 to 2% difference in our DNA is actually radically huge. Now, it's a little bit of a misnomer or a little bit of a misdirection on just how incredibly different our genetic encoding is from a chimpanzee, despite the fact that it is 98% close. There's, just that 2% difference really makes us radically different. Phenotypically, number one, we're just the complete antithesis to chimpanzees. Our legs are longer than our arms, and we stand upright, or at least we're supposed to. Most of our body is not covered in fur. Ironically, the parts of our body that have the most hair is our face, whereas most, chimpanzees don't. Our feet are totally different. They're pointed forward, and chimpanzees have like hand feet. Now the reason why I'm going through all these differences is because you have to keep in mind that we as humans are incredibly special animals. So special that it is totally reasonable for us to create an arbitrary difference between us and other animals, whereas we don't have that category. Well, I mean, we have species and classes and all that, but the reason why we don't really relate to, or the huge wide animal kingdom, is because, like let's take this into consideration. We mastered electricity and wireless communication with each other. Just off the top of my bloody head. Like, what other animal gets on a camera and a microphone and then pontificates philosophical ideas of which they upload to an information network that is then downloaded and spread across to thousands of other people? I mean, you could say it's arbitrary, but it really isn't, because we are, as animals, just that different from most other animals in the animal kingdom. It's just a fact that you couldn't deny even if you wanted to. You especially couldn't deny it if you're on the internet.
It's a fair point. Why should we consider ourselves so different from other animals, and to the extent that they're ours to do with as we please?
I'm going to activate the card, the entire thesis to my response, okay? So basically, I'm going to be repeating this thread throughout the course of the video series. And so I think it's best to lay this foundation down right here at the beginning. And that is, one of the biggest differences, which is the whole of the difference between us and any animal that's not a human, is our cognitive ability to recognize each other as moral agents, and the responsibility that we have morally to each other in terms of having a cohesive social environment or society in general. In fact, so much so that if one person does not recognize their moral responsibility, it not only can cause a great degree of chaos, but we also punish that individual as well. This will become relevant later in the video discussion, but it is important to recognize something, and that is, animals outside of humans do not have a moral responsibility to each other. And by moral responsibility, I mean an expectation and a guideline on how we should treat each other and how we should deal with each other. For example, a moral guideline or moral responsibility we humans have is we don't steal from each other. Animals steal from each other all of the bloody time. And more than that, animals don't even recognize or even understand what morality is. They don't even recognize that morality is something that you should and you shouldn't really do. Whereas humans, on the other hand, do have that understanding and are able to replicate that or reciprocate that between each other. So I'll get into more detail as the video goes on, but it is very important to recognize that very basic fact. That is, animals have no moral responsibility to us, and they can't even comprehend the idea unto itself. And thus, if they can't reciprocate morality to us humans, it is totally stupid for us humans to try to give it to them.
Here we deal with argument number 1 in favor of meat eating. Humans are superior to other animals because of X, and therefore we can eat them. Yeah, few problems with that. Firstly, by what metric are we superior?
Now, I'm not going to be defending this argument as reasonable. In fact, I don't think that that's even necessary. Superiority just seems kind of ridiculous. In fact, the only argument that you really need to just justify eating meat is this one. Carnivores eat meat and they're animals, and there's nothing wrong with them eating meat. If humans are animals and thus have the capacity to eat meat, then it's fine for us to eat other animals. If it's okay for one animal to consume another animal, then it should be fine. In fact, even if you would want to extend that to it's not okay for animals to eat other animals, there's no way you could possibly regulate that in the animal kingdom, because cheetahs eat gazelles all the time. And if you don't hold cheetahs to that extent or that regard to where they should be vegetarians, it would be silly to hold humans to that extent as well, considering the fact that we are animals.
Perhaps the only feasible answer to this is something along the lines of intelligence. Clearly, human beings possess a higher cognitive ability than, say, a chicken.
Yes, under that umbrella of intelligence, you could say we humans infinitely have a much better way of creating tools, and we have a much better way of communicating information between each other. I mean, granted, that is all based on intelligence, so it is that whole catch-all, but you have to recognize just how radical of a difference that is between us and other animals. That our intelligence and our ability to craft tools and whatnot makes us just vastly superior by most metrics. Perhaps not in terms of biological function, whereas you'll probably find that most animals are physically stronger than most humans, and their teeth and their bones are probably vastly stronger than us in any physical sense. But our intelligence gave us the tools and the abilities to completely overtake them to where it's not even necessary. I mean, a gun is a great equalizer. It doesn't matter how big or strong a tiger is. Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, will blow its head clean off. Actually, will it blow its head clean off? I don't know. I don't think anyone should try it, though. I'm not saying you should just go out and shoot tigers in the face.
But my question is this: what relevance does that hold to morality? Why should intelligence be the metric by which we measure moral worth?
Well, it shouldn't. But what's more important is we need to define what moral worth even is. What does it even mean to have moral worth? I would, by some definition, just on the top of my head, would say moral worth is your ability to understand and thus reciprocate what morality is and give it back to another person. Every human being has some degree of moral worth, some ability to recognize what morality is and then reciprocate it. And thus, because we can recognize it, we have our responsibility to each other, because that's the only way our society could even function. For example, if we all were mistrustful and we all thought people were going to be thieves and steal from us, we probably couldn't really have stores, and we probably really couldn't have a currency, because the currency would be worthless. We'd always just be taken from each other. And everybody would not trust anyone else because they all would have the expectation that the other person's just going to take their things. So in order for society to function well, we all have to have an understanding that we probably shouldn't steal from each other. And the people that do steal from us, well, they get in trouble. And it's not only just that they get in trouble, but they do cause a great degree of social dishesion. Dishesion's not a word, but of social breakdown. For example, if someone stole your car and your family was in trouble and they need you to get there, well, now you've just hurt not only the person whose car you stole, but their family as well. So literally causing one act of theft can damage multiple people. So that's just one example of just how not reciprocating morality can hurt lots of other people, not just one, but why we can't have that expectation of not being moral to each other because of the degree of social chaos that can be caused by literally one person doing something wrong or not adhering to morality. For example, if one person were to kill even a cashier, the amount of damage that ripple effect can cause to not only that cashier's family, but to that cashier's children can be astronomical. This is just so astronomical, we can't really even quantify how much mental torment it could be by just killing one cashier. That's why it's in social expectation that we just don't randomly go around and kill people. But let me ask you a very serious question. Is there a social expectation that a wolf does not kill a rabbit?
It's arbitrary. It means nothing in itself. Should we morally value human beings with higher intelligence over other humans with lower intelligence? I think not.
No. And the reason why we don't is because low intelligent human beings still have the capacity to recognize moral responsibility and moral reciprocation. Animals don't have that capacity at all. And thus, because they cannot reciprocate morality, it would be silly for us to offer morality to them because they will never give it back to us. I mean, if a bear killed your family members, would you put that bear on trial for murder? If a rat destroyed parts of your barn, would you put them on trial for property damage? I mean, the obvious answer is no. However, if a human killed someone else, we would put them on trial, would we not? Because they are not acting morally responsible, and thus our legal system needs to remove them from the population. So, I mean, hopefully you guys are getting the point that I'm making here.
But even if you do, we surely shouldn't value them to the extent that they should be able to mistreat, kill, and eat the less intelligent humans just because they think they taste nice. Clearly, it's not intelligence alone that can justify this kind of practice. And again, why intelligence? Why not choose some other feature than intelligence, like, say, eyesight? Clearly, eagles have a far superior eyesight to humans, but does that give them any higher moral worth?
Well, no. But here's something I want you to take into consideration. An eagle has far superior flight and eyesight to the water moccasin at the top of a riverbed. If the eagle swoops down and grabs the water moccasin and then eats him, or feeds that water moccasin to its chicks in the nest, Could you put that eagle on trial for murder? The answer is no. You couldn't, and you wouldn't. See, here's the long and short of it, my friend. Moral worth doesn't really matter in terms of whether or not we can or cannot eat another species, because the very nature of our existence, even as human beings, is that we have to prioritize our own existence over another organism's. And that would include plants, by the way. Plants are also living organisms. Now, of course, plants aren't sentient organisms. They don't really think critically about the world or think at all, as far as I know. But we still have to consume them for nourishment as well. And other animals have to graze on grass and plants too. Life, existence itself, is one organism prioritizing their existence over another. A tiger, killing an elephant. I don't know if tigers hunt elephants in India. But, okay, let's use lions hunting gazelles, okay? The lion has to prioritize his life or her life over that of the gazelle. It's not about morality. It's not about wrong or right. It's just about, I want to live. The only way I can live is by eating. And it would be the same thing for us humans as well when it comes to the consumption of any organism, for that matter. We have to prioritize our own life over the life of a plant or over the life of a cow. That's just how we function as living organisms. We all have to consume another living organism in order to continue to be. And I didn't make it this way. That's just how it is. So under that understanding that that's just how the world functions, humans are animals, and humans have the capacity to eat meat and plants. So we're omnivores. We're not even solely carnivorous anyway. But because humans have the capacity to do that, and because humans prioritize their own existence over another animal's existence, then it would be logically consistent to say that it's okay for us to eat other animals in the same way that it's okay for other animals to eat both plants and, well, other animals. Now, humans are actually a very particular branch of animals, actually. Whereas evolution states that an organism's desire to survive and reproduce is pretty much their prime directive, humans operate in a really weird, twisted sense in relation to that, because humans can become very self-destructive, which is another thing that separates us from most of the animals. Other animals don't ever try to do anything to hurt themselves. But a human will. A human will become depressed. A human will cut themselves. A human will starve themselves. A human will do... Some humans will straight up commit suicide. So with the understanding that humans are a really, really complex in relation to evolutionary thought, so much so that we should probably really reevaluate how we think about evolutionary thought, just on the surface of how it relates to humans, you have to really take into consideration like what we're actually talking about here and just how radically different we are as animals in relation to any other animal that you can come up with or you could talk about. We really are just that radically different, and it's silly to suggest that we aren't, and it's silly to suggest that those differences don't matter. You can distill it down to something as simple as saying that humans are more intelligent or whatever nonsense that you're speaking, but if you actually look in terms of reality and functionally, every animal has to prioritize its own existence over another animal. That's just kind of the way that it is. And since we all animals want to survive and reproduce, that's just what we have to do. It'd be that way sometimes. It'd be that way all the time.
Of course not. What is it about intelligence that its mere possession grants you a right to life and liberty that should be restricted from those who lack it? Nothing. It's a poor excuse. Now obviously, high intelligence is arguably more useful to humanity than good eyesight is, but we have to be careful to distinguish that we're not looking for how we can judge what is most useful, but rather how we can judge what has more moral worth. And this can't be linked to intelligence. Trying to find a quality that a being can possess to justify them treating other beings who don't have that quality differently is known to philosophers as naming the trait, or as I'm presenting it, the name the trait argument. Essentially, the argument is that it's not possible to find the trait that non-human animals supposedly lack, that if a human were to lack, we'd treat the human how we currently treat the animals.
And thus, the heart of the cards has guided me well, because I activate the magic card. That is incredibly fucking obvious. Now, here's the thing. You're an atheist. And a lot of atheists, just based on pattern recognition, are big fans of that whole theory of evolution, right? So if I understand the theory of evolution correctly, most organisms, or at least evolutionary psychology correctly, most organisms all have a desire to survive and reproduce and spread their genes, right? Which would mean that what essentially you're asking a human being to do is to come up with an argument that explains why it's okay for them to kill themselves or why it's okay for them to be mistreated. You're essentially asking us to do something that goes against our very prime directive, evolutionarily speaking, that is surviving and reproducing. And here's the thing that's so basically obvious to any mentally sound person. They will never in their life argue that it's okay to hurt themselves. In fact, no organism would ever argue that it's okay to hurt them. In fact, I would imagine that if you could talk to a gazelle, would a gazelle ever argue that it's okay for them to be hunted out of their gigantic herd by a lion and then feasted upon? Probably not. Would a rat ever argue that it's okay for a diamondback rattlesnake to bite them and paralyze them and eat them? Probably not. No prey animal, no animal in general really would ever argue that it's okay to harm them or kill them. Except humans. Humans are actually the only animals, as far as I know, that can actually become suicidal. Which again, in terms of evolutionary thought, is incredibly radical, and I have no idea why, no one thinks about this. That humans can become self-destructive in such a manner, but I mean, that's just another conversation. It's a radically interesting conversation that no one fucking has, but we'll just save that for some other time. Humans are the only animals that will do that, but any other animal doesn't want, and this would include most mentally sound humans, by the way, will never argue that it's okay to kill and eat them. So that's why that argument, name the trait, sounds brilliant. Except, my friends, until you recognize something that I mentioned earlier in the video, don't worry, my friends, it'll become relevant if you stuck up to this point.
For instance, you say we kill the animals because they don't have trait X that humans do have. And the argument is, if we found a human being who themselves lacked X, would we be justified in killing them? If the answer is no, then we haven't actually identified the trait that justifies killing animals at all. You can put anything you like where X goes. You might say that we kill animals because they can't talk, for instance. The response is, if there's a human who can't talk, should we kill them? Of course not. Now, the ability to talk is, of course, not a common argument, but it illustrates the point. As an example, let's take the earlier and more common point of intelligence. The argument from the person naming the trait would be that we can treat animals as we please because they have less intelligence than we do. That's the trait. Not only is this not technically provable beyond necessarily biased metrics of intelligence, not only does it stink of so-called scientific racism, where the maltreatment of other races was justified by an appeal to their alleged lack of intelligence, but if we took a human being and turned them into the least intelligent human being you know of, would you flinch if I turned them upside down and slit their throat for food? Why?
Because it's gross.
If the argument is that we can kill animals because they're less intelligent, then you're saying that it's merely lacking intelligence that justifies the taking of their life. If this doesn't apply to humans too, then there's something you're leaving out of your reasoning, because it's not just intelligence. And what is that something?
Something, my friend, is moral reciprocation and moral responsibility. You see, my friend, we have capital punishment, which means if someone breaks the law, depending on the state that you're in, and depending on the crime, whether it's justified as punishment, we can execute them. We also have a prison industrial complex where we take people and we remove them from the general population if they have committed a crime for a set period of time. Now, the reason why we're able to do that is because those people have failed to morally reciprocate the established law or moral criteria that we all have, or responsibility that we have to each other. So you wanted me to name the trait. That trait is moral responsibility and moral reciprocation. If a human kills another human being, we take away their freedom, and in some states we take away their life, depending on, after a trial, we determine the extremity of their breaking the law or their murder. If a human steals, if a human commits arson, if a human does anything wrong to another person, we will absolutely take away their rights and remove them from the general population and put them in cages, i.e. jail or prison. Animals have no ability to morally reciprocate. Animals have no responsibility to us. Again, would you ever put a fox on trial because he stole some of your stuff? I'm looking at you, Swiper. No, of course not. I mean, how could you even put a fox on trial? Could you put any animal on trial after they... If you're on a mountain path and a bobcat came out of nowhere and mauled your wife to death, would you put that bobcat on trial for murder? No, because that bobcat has no responsibility to not kill your wife. If animals have no more responsibility to treat us humans well, then logically it would be absurd for us to try to project this onto animals because they'll never reciprocate it back to us. And that is why, my friend, in your whole name the trait argument, what is the trait that makes it okay for us humans to do with animals as we please? It's the same trait that makes it so that animals can do to us what they please. And that is a lack of more responsibility and even understanding between each other.
Well, it's invariably the mere fact that humans are the same species as you are, and that non-human animals aren't. This, of course, has absolutely no moral relevance of its own accord, and it's just not a good enough reason to mistreat other living beings.
Wrong. It is the entire relevance of the conversation, my friend. Humans can recognize more responsibility to each other, and thus it's not okay for us to break that responsibility we have to one another. Not just for social, societal cohesion, just us functioning in society, but also breaking the law will then retract our rights from each other, and thus we'll be punished for it. So that concludes part 1. So my friends, join me for part 2 as we continue to dissect his arguments. So with that being said, I just hope you guys got something out of today's video, and if you did, man, go click the like button. If you're going to click that, subscribe. Comment in the comment box below. As always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I'll see you cool cats soon. Adios.